Good morning, I'm John Kegel, and I am a project manager for Selltis and have been for some time. Joining me on the line is Deborah Howell, who is head of our support team. And this morning we'd like to talk a little bit about making data in Selltis a little bit more complete. And in addition, at the same time, making some other processes outside of Selltis perhaps a little bit more efficient, and overall making our team be able to do more with the limited resources that they have. So this morning we're going to talk about a customer solution. We call it quote to order, but really what we're talking about here is being able to put order information that's valid and that is continuing on in the MRP or the ERP system. That data is shown in Selltis, juxtaposed against my favorite word today, and that's shown against our front-end sales process kind of data, such as activity histories, leads, opportunities to win revenue, and actual quotes in Selltis. So let's jump into it a little bit here this morning. Do feel free to jump in with any questions while I am recording this session for hopefully future use. We'll certainly want to have your input and be able to make this a great live conversation. So a lot of times when we're approaching this, this idea of back-end integration and moving data between two systems, it seems kind of like a puzzle. But it's really more, it's really not so much a puzzle as it is just being able to document the processes so our technical team can do what we want them to do. So our situation for a particular customer, and actually customers I should say, is that the front end of the sales process was really not tied to this idea of throwing that quote over the proverbial technical wall and being processed as an order and then eventually an order history. So we wanted to put in place processes, again, to marry those things together. At the same time, these various staff members were doing quotes in Selltis, doing quotes in the ERP system, in this case, P21. In this case, P21. And so we had disparate processes too. We weren't providing a consistent marketing message or a consistent marketing idea or branding to our customers. In addition to that, even in the back-end system, in P21 again in this case, there are some strict validations that needed to be done. We needed to make sure the SKU was valid, that the pricing was valid for that particular order history. So there's a lot of double entry going on. There's a lot of spreadsheets being generated to try to match things up, and on and on and on. You can imagine that this puzzle was magnetically opposed. These pieces were not wanting to fit together before we started talking about integrating the two systems. So perhaps some of you who are Selltis customers or even Selltis prospects have seen a chart that looks like this. And in this chart, the green dots here are traditional kind of processes managed by a customer relationship or Salesforce automation system. We're working through our marketing information, identifying opportunities, qualifying leads. As we qualify those leads, then we get into more of a strategic situation typically, where we're identifying our unique value proposition in this sales situation to a particular prospect, identifying our competition, buying influences, and on and on and on, all the things we need to do to kind of close a sale. And then traditionally, we've been taking the result of all of that work, which is the customer saying, well, how much is it, the quote here, and kind of throwing that over the wall to an internal customer service team, a data entry team, whatever the case may be. Now, we're still now in this new process, sort of throwing the quote from one system to another. But now we have one system, one consistent marketing and branding message to our customers and one system for data entry that we can validate, again, without trying to validate it in two different places. The quote, as it's passed from, in this case, Selltis on the front end to, in this case, again, in this scenario, P21 on the back end system, the quote is being reviewed and validated and followed up from the material resource planning or from the manufacturing standpoint in the back-end system. But once that's validated, we're taking that information and then passing it right back into Selltis so that we can see this order history information juxtaposed, again my favorite word today, or married against or shown relative to all of the information that we have in Selltis. So let me unmute for just a second here at a little background noise and see if you guys have any questions or comments on that as we go along. All right, very good. Let's continue on just a little bit. I have the situation being, again, quotes entered in two systems. This makes orders difficult to generate and validate. I have various people who need to sign off, again, for pricing and those types of things. And again, that duplicate data entry is a nightmare. The staff is more productive if they're not trying to keep data up in two different systems. So the objective then is to provide for a salesperson, for an industry or market segment, for a target customer, for a product, and other things, this quote history. And those quote histories then are what we call in Selltis an order history, again, by these same factors. No merging of reports. The idea would be to improve the sales process, possibly even shorten the sales process, and improve our communication with our customer and internally. Okay. In addition to that, think of the integration as being more than just throwing order histories. We're also in a place where we're providing a company update, information about being able to tag our contacts and companies' records, and also our SKU information or our model information, depending on the word you use, in both systems. Also allows us then to manage goals, not only looking forward, here's our goals for, say, our opportunity pipeline, but also then looking in the rearview mirror with those order histories and look at those goals together. And I've already mentioned consistent marketing message and, of course, providing alerts if we have some exceptions and those types of things. All right. So here's the gist of it, kind of the process to get you thinking. And I should mention here that it really doesn't have to be about quotes to orders, even though that's what we're talking about today. There could be other data that you need to pass back and forth between other systems. For example, we're on the phone with another customer this morning who's passing back and forth marketing information so that we can keep track of some metrics that they desire and route from the website operation and have those in Selltis too as we develop those strategic opportunities and match things together. All right. So this morning we'll continue on thinking about this process, and here it is. For this situation in Selltis, again, we typically have kind of a default process of leads, opportunities, and quotes. A big bucket of leads qualified to a smaller bucket of strategic opportunities, and hopefully the customer says how much, so we need to write quotes in a consistent manner to the customer. When we win those quotes, when the customer says, yes, I'm giving you a purchase order, we're going to send those quotes to the ERP system. And again, we're beginning that order processing, accounting, materials ordering or planning, or the manufacturing processes that are inherent in the ERP system. We're starting those processes separately. That order then is staged before we begin those obviously, that order is staged in the ERP system for validation. There's somebody actually looking at these before they press the go button. And so think about that. You could have a number of gates if necessary. If the quote is greater than $50,000, then someone needs to sign off on it. If the quote has a margin of less than X percent, then someone needs to sign off on it before we get into the order situation, before we hit go. So then that validation continues in the ERP, and as I mentioned, continues those processes. Once that begins, once we say go, then right back into Selltis is that order history. So we're not just looking at one quote, we're really looking at a validated order history detail in Selltis. In addition, as I mentioned, other information is being shared. I mentioned the customer model or SKU information about our users and what they're doing, updating all of our territory reports, updating all of our product reports, our vendor reports, division reports, etc. And last, it's fully automated in real time. So we have our Selltis users accessing their data via the web page that is typically, Selltis.selltis.com, or substitute your company name.selltis.com, and they're accessing that data via the internet in real time, and so that order information is always available, and you then substitute that conversation of what were your orders today, on the phone to I see your orders today were great, by looking in Selltis. All right, questions on that so far? I want to show you a few examples. Okay, I'll continue on. I mentioned that it's important to have this order history in Selltis because we're showing it against a variety of different categories. Whenever I talk about CRM in terms of Selltis, I talk about being able to enter into the data from a variety of perspectives. And so a perspective of entering into the data is one that you all know, and that's entering into a company perspective and seeing the bookings or the order histories by date range, by person who entered the order, by product, etc. So we're entering into the data in this particular case from usually a target perspective, right? A target customer perspective. Here's our top 20 accounts. I really am keeping track on a, every other hour or every other day, depending on, your frequency of what's going on with a particular target customer. That's important to us. But we can also enter into the data. Oh, I should say, here's another example of that. Here would be a company mini views type of desktop where I have a master view of a list of companies. And not only do we see, the contacts and that static kind of data, but we're seeing any quotes, whether they be open or complete, the recent activities, and then, of course, that order information here. I've summed up a big one here, and you can see that they have this amount of data, and we can certainly put the dollar value here. This is actual customer data, so I didn't want to show it for too long. But you can see that, of course, we can sum that data by month, by year, by date range, of course, by user, by product, etc. And then here's another example where we're showing orders by a market segment. So for each model or SKU that's in that order history, there's a relative product group, and that product group may be selling to a particular company market segment, a particular NAICS code, a particular SIC, a particular industry. However you classify that in Selltis, what I'm trying to say is we can break that order history down and take a look at this particular data by entering into the database from the perspective, in this case, of a market segment. Well, I know it's been a brief session, but hopefully I've gotten you into a place where you're thinking about how these processes can be used for you to make, again, probably the biggest objective we have with this is to be able to take the current resources we have and make them more productive. We can do that, again, in this situation with some consistency in reporting, consistency in quoting or other activities, including that presentation to the customer. Consistency in quoting in terms of, are we pricing correctly? Is our shipping details correct? Are we shipping as efficiently as we can before we get that information out to the customer? All of that kind of stuff can be provided in a consistency between two systems. That concurs with what we've already talked about, which is this better data management. I think more productivity per user. Being able to see data at a glance is so key for a lot of our customers. I look up a target account, I see what's happened in the last 3 months, 6 months. I view that data against the forecast that I have, and I'm really ready to be productive in interacting with that customer. Okay. Sales reps, think about it. If you have your windshield guy out in the middle of South Dakota, he's going to go in and visit his 6th largest account. All of a sudden you ask him to go look up quote history or order history via a VPN on his iPad with a sketchy connection. That can be a real big pain. We're putting this all in one nice clean website, easy to read dashboard for him to see that information all in one place. And don't forget the goals. So if you're setting goals in Selltis, of course, we can show that order history by target company, product, supplier, product group, and market segment, and on and on and on. Questions this morning? That's what I have. How'd you like it?
Is everyone still muted?
That could be. No, I don't think so. Not everyone's muted because I can hear you. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time this morning, and I hope that this has stimulated some thought for you and that we can continue the conversation on. You guys have a great weekend. Take care.
You too. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
All right. See you.
Bye.